My sister called the cops on me. She said I was dealing pills out of my apartment. I was sitting at my kitchen table sipping cold coffee and reviewing monthly reports for a client when I heard the knock. Three short, sharp hits on the door. Not the kind you ignore. Not the kind that comes from neighbors or packages. I opened the door, still in my pajamas, and saw two uniformed officers standing there, one tall and stoic, the other scribbling something into a pad. Naomi Hensley, the tall one asked. I nodded. We received a report of controlled substances being stored and distributed from this residence. Do you mind if we take a look inside? I blinked. Controlled what? There had to be some mistake. I laughed. Actually laughed. Sorry, what, you think I have drugs? The other one lifted a sheet of paper, a warrant with my name on it, and suddenly my lungs forgot how to breathe. They walked past me like they'd done this before, like they already knew where to go. I followed in stunned silence as they moved straight to the hallway closet, the one I never used. One of them opened the door, reached behind a shoebox, and pulled out a sealed plastic bag. Inside were small orange pills. The officer held them up, turned to me, and said, "You want to explain this?" My mouth went dry. That's not mine. I've never seen that before in my life. Behind them, my parents stood in the doorway, calm, expressionless. My mom's arms were crossed, and my dad was checking his watch. You should cooperate, my mom said. Don't make this worse than it needs to be. My sister Vanessa leaned against the wall. Her arms folded, a smug little twist on her lips like she'd won something. This couldn't be real. This was a mistake, a horrible, unbelievable mistake. But no one looked confused. No one looked surprised. Not even my dog barked. They handcuffed me right there in my own living room. My mom didn't flinch. My dad didn't speak. Vanessa looked at me like I was a stranger. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I stood still, wrists burning, and I thought, this isn't happening. This can't be real. But it was. And deep down beneath the disbelief, beneath the ache in my chest, something else started to rise. Not fear, not shame, something sharper, something colder, anger. Because they thought I'd stay quiet. They thought I'd take the fall. They forgot who I am. My name is Naomi Hensley. I'm 32 years old, a senior financial analyst at a mid-sized fintech firm in San Diego. My life is quiet, orderly, and deliberately unremarkable. I live alone in a modest 2-bedroom apartment I bought myself after years of saving. I don't go out much, don't party, don't make scenes. I work, I read, I walk my dog, I build things, financial structures, retirement plans, risk maps. I know how to protect assets, and I know how to hide them too. It's ironic, really. All this time, I was the one everyone called boring, invisible, uptight. And yet, when things went south, I was the one they needed to fall. My family has always revolved around one person, Vanessa. My older sister, 3 years ahead of me in age, and about 3 decades ahead in parental adoration. She was the golden one, the beautiful one, the charming disaster everyone seemed to forgive no matter what she did. I used to joke that Vanessa could set the house on fire, and our parents would blame the match for tempting her. My parents are the kind of people who speak in smiles at dinner parties and hold grudges like heirlooms. My mom used to be a part-time event planner. My dad a semi-retired tax consultant who still calls me on April 14th every year to remind me how to itemize deductions. They're not evil, just strategic. Appearances mean everything in my family. The narrative matters more than the truth. And in that narrative, Vanessa is the protagonist. I'm the footnote. A few years ago, after Vanessa's third failed business venture, a juice bar in Austin that went belly up in 6 months, my parents convinced me to help. Not because they asked, but because they positioned it as my duty. Family helps family, my dad said, and somehow that translated to me co-signing a loan and opening a joint account under the guise of emergency liquidity. I didn't argue. Not because I agreed, but because I was tired. Tired of being the responsible one. Tired of being guilt-tripped, tired of fighting for fairness in a rigged game, so I agreed. I opened the account, I monitored it, I told myself it was temporary. But temporary became indefinite. Over time, I noticed withdrawals that didn't match the agreed terms. Vanessa stopped communicating. My parents became vague, and every time I brought it up, the answer was some version of, "You're just being dramatic. It's not a big deal." Meanwhile, I was the one paying taxes on interest they were spending. I started quietly separating my finances. I transferred my savings into a private trust. I set up notifications on every account. I installed a camera in my apartment not for security, but because I didn't trust anyone anymore. I told myself it was precaution, not paranoia, that it was just a safety net. But deep down, I think I knew that something was coming, that one day I'd need proof. And that day came faster than I expected. I hadn't seen Vanessa in 2 months. The last time we spoke, she asked if she could crash at my place for a few days. She showed up with 2 duffel bags, stayed one night, and left without saying goodbye. The next week, $5,000 disappeared from the joint account. I asked my mother about it. She said Vanessa had needed it for a situation. When I pressed, she said, "Let it go, Naomi. It's just money." But it wasn't just money. It was my name, my records, my responsibility. And more than that, it was the final warning. That week I changed the locks. I removed access. I closed the joint account. I told myself that was the end of it, that I'd drawn the line. But I underestimated how far they were willing to go to reassert control. There's a type of silence that creeps in after years of being the only one who notices things. The silence that follows every time you bring up something uncomfortable. And they laugh it off, call you dramatic, say you're overthinking. That silence lived in every corner of my parents' house. It filled the space between words, sat at the dinner table, watched us like a ghost. I first noticed the cracks when I was 15. Vanessa had borrowed my debit card to order shoes online. I only found out when my part-time paycheck disappeared overnight. My parents said, "She didn't mean it. We'll pay you back." They never did. I learned early that fairness was optional in our house, and it depended heavily on who was speaking. Vanessa always got the last word. And if she didn't, she got backup. When she wrecked her first car, they blamed the rain. When I got a speeding ticket going 10 over, I lost driving privileges for a month. I started tracking patterns, not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted clarity. I thought that if I could understand the formula, I could survive it. I could play the part. So I kept my head down, got straight A's, skipped parties, took out student loans so they wouldn't have to co-sign, built my own life piece by piece. And yet I kept sending money. Not large sums, just enough to help when they asked. For repairs, for unexpected bills, for Vanessa's therapy once, though I never knew which therapist or for what reason. They always came to me with their hands open and their stories half-formed. I didn't ask questions because I didn't want to hear the lies. I just wired the money and told myself I was keeping the peace. But peace is expensive, and I was the only one paying. Vanessa never held a steady job. Her businesses were always about to turn a corner. She moved in and out of apartments, dated men with vague job descriptions, went to wellness retreats, and came back detoxed and broke. My parents called her resilient. They called me stable, like it was a consolation prize. The real shift came 6 months before the arrest. I was visiting my parents for Sunday dinner, something I did out of obligation more than affection. Vanessa was there barefoot in the kitchen, sipping wine like she owned the place. She asked me how work was, but her eyes were scanning my purse, my watch, my phone. I told her about a recent promotion, and she smiled tight and insincere. "Must be nice," she said. "Not all of us were born for spreadsheets." Later that night, my dad pulled me aside. "Your sister's going through something? We think she might need a place to stay for a while." I told him no, firmly, clearly, without guilt. "My apartment isn't a halfway house," I said. He looked disappointed. Not angry, just resigned, like he was finally seeing me as someone with boundaries, and he didn't like it. A week later, I noticed Vanessa had tried to reset my email password. I got the notification while reviewing expense reports at work. I changed everything. Passwords, locks, bank pins. I texted her to ask if she'd tried logging in. She replied with a thumbs up emoji and didn't respond again. That's when I knew. She wasn't just desperate. She was planning something. I didn't know the details. I didn't know the timing. But I recognized the pattern, the quiet before the break, the manipulation disguised as miscommunication. I started sleeping with my phone beside me. I checked my credit score weekly. I moved important documents to a locked cabinet at work. Paranoia. Maybe, but it's not paranoia if you're right. The next call I got from my parents was about a small misunderstanding involving a shared account Vanessa had access to. They said a few charges might appear on my end, but not to worry. I didn't respond. That weekend, I transferred every asset I had into a blind trust managed by an attorney friend I'd helped during her divorce. She owed me a favor. I told her, just hold it for 6 months. If nothing happens, I'll transfer it back. She didn't ask why. She trusted me, which is more than I could say for my own family. 2 weeks later, the cops knocked on my door. It was a Thursday morning. I remember because I had just emailed our CFO a projection summary and was waiting on a response. The coffee in my mug had gone lukewarm. My dog Jasper was asleep near the radiator, his snore steady and soft. Everything felt normal, routine, until the knock. 3 times firm and deliberate. I looked through the peephole. 2 officers, both in uniform, standing shoulder to shoulder. I opened the door slowly, heart already sinking. Naomi Hensley, the taller one, asked. Yes, I replied. We have a warrant to search the premises. He handed me the paper, printed and official. I barely scanned it before they moved past me, professional and precise. What is this about? I asked. But they were already inside, glancing around, stepping carefully across my clean floors. We received a tip about illegal narcotics on site, the other officer said. Narcotics, I echoed. You've got the wrong place. I don't even take aspirin. They didn't respond. Instead, one officer went straight for the hallway closet, the same one I hadn't touched in weeks. He opened it, reached behind a box of old blankets, and pulled out a clear bag filled with bright orange pills. My stomach dropped. That's not mine. I've never seen that before, I said, my voice rising shaky. The officers didn't react. They'd heard it before. They always do. One of them asked me to step aside, then handcuffed me. As he clicked the metal around my wrists, I saw my parents standing in the hallway of my building. My mom in a pressed blouse holding her purse like she was going to church. My dad beside her, stone-faced. Behind them, Vanessa. She didn't flinch when our eyes met. She didn't smile either. She just watched. My mom spoke first. Naomi, don't make this worse than it already is. Just cooperate. What are you doing here? I asked. You told them I had drugs? You believe this? My dad avoided my eyes. The officer said they'd spoken to my family, that my sister had seen me with the pills, that my parents confirmed I'd been acting erratically. I stared at them, numb. You know that's not true. Say something. Vanessa, tell them the truth. But she said nothing. Her silence louder than any lie. They walked me out of my own apartment in handcuffs. My neighbors peeked from behind doors. Jasper barked once, then whimpered. I couldn't even comfort him, couldn't touch him. My hands were bound and my voice felt like it had been stolen. At the precinct, they processed me like I was just another name in a long list of offenders. They fingerprinted me, took my photo, asked me questions I barely heard. I sat in the holding cell, staring at the floor. My mind blank except for one thought repeating like a drumbeat. They planned this. They didn't just let it happen. They built it, designed it. Vanessa must have known about the blind trust. Or maybe she suspected. Maybe she realized she couldn't touch my money unless I was legally compromised. And my parents. They'd always wanted unity no matter the cost. Maybe this was their idea of control. Eliminate the obstacle, preserve the golden child. I tried to remember if I had any enemies, anyone else who could have framed me, but it always came back to them. My own family. I asked for a phone call. They gave me one. I called Laura my best friend, the one person I trusted without question. Her voice trembled when she picked up. Naomi, are you okay? No, I said. But I need you to do something for me. I told her about the security cam, the file folders in the locked drawer, the envelope labeled just in case. She didn't ask questions. She just said, on it. I hung up and sat back against the wall. The cuffs had left red marks on my wrists. My future hung in the balance, suspended by lies. And still, I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't hurt, but because the pain had calcified, hardened into resolve. They thought I'd break. They thought I'd go down quiet. But they forgot I prepare for things. I always have. And this time I was prepared for them. The holding cell smelled like bleach and stale fear. The bench was too narrow to lie down on, but too hard to sit on for long. The lights buzzed overhead like insects, fluorescent and unforgiving. I stared at the gray wall in front of me and felt nothing. Not anger, not despair, just a strange hollow calm, like my emotions had packed up and left before the damage could reach them. I thought of Jasper. I imagined him pacing near the door, waiting for sounds that wouldn't come. I thought of my plants, my quiet apartment, my unfinished grocery list taped to the fridge. My life had been full of small, steady rituals, things I did to stay grounded. And now I was adrift, accused, abandoned. I closed my eyes and found myself back in the house I grew up in. I was 8, maybe 9, sitting at the kitchen table with a math workbook open in front of me. Vanessa was twirling in the living room, showing off a new dress. My mom clapped and told her she looked like a princess. I raised my hand to ask for help and no one looked. I solved the problem on my own. It wasn't the first time. It wouldn't be the last. I remember the time I won a regional essay contest and my parents forgot to attend the ceremony. My teacher gave me the certificate. Vanessa had a dance recital that day. Priorities. I used to think it was an oversight, that they simply didn't realize what they were doing. But now, after years of being the fallback, the one who cleaned up messes and fixed mistakes, I understood. It wasn't about forgetting. It was about choosing. They chose her, every time. The silence in the cell reminded me of all those years when I swallowed my disappointment and smiled through gritted teeth. When I lent money and said it's fine even though it wasn't. When I apologized first just to keep things smooth. I used to believe that if I was perfect enough, they'd see me, that they'd appreciate me, that they'd finally say, "You matter." But they never did. And when I drew the line, when I protected myself, they called it betrayal. I leaned my head against the wall. The cool surface steadied me. I thought of my Aunt Evelyn, the only adult who ever truly saw me. She died when I was 20, but before she passed, she took me aside and said, "Naomi, being the quiet one doesn't mean you're the weak one. They just haven't heard you roar yet." I smiled at the memory. She'd left me a small inheritance, which I had used to pay off my student loans. I never told anyone about it. It was mine, untouched by guilt or manipulation. Jasper had been a gift to myself after that, a promise that I wouldn't just survive, I'd build a life that was mine. And now that life was hanging by a thread because my sister had decided that I was expendable, because my parents believed it was easier to sacrifice me than confront her mess. I didn't cry. I hadn't since the arrest. But inside, something shifted. A quiet rebellion, steady and deliberate. They thought they'd erased me, that I'd go quietly into the box they built for me. But I had my own plans. I had proof. I had people who cared. Laura, my lawyer, my own voice. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for someone to save me. I was saving myself. By the time I met my lawyer, the storm had already started to shift. Her name was Elise Hartman, and she looked like someone who didn't care much about pleasantries. No flashy suit, no rehearsed warmth. Just a folder in her hand, and eyes that scanned everything like they were documenting it for court. She sat across from me in the visitation room, opened the folder, and said, "I've reviewed the initial report. The evidence is thin, circumstantial." I nodded. It was planted. She looked up sharp. "By who, my sister?" "With the help of my parents." Elise didn't blink. "Do you have proof?" I hesitated. Then I told her everything. About the security cam hidden in the living room light fixture. About the cloud backup tied to a secondary email. About the safe deposit box containing duplicate financial records. I had set it all up over the past year long before any of this happened. Not because I saw this exact betrayal coming, but because I understood the direction things were heading. Vanessa had gotten desperate. My parents had grown complicit. I knew eventually they would try to corner me, so I had prepared. Elise didn't ask why I had done it. She just said, "Good. Let's move quickly." She made a call. By the next morning, Laura had dropped off the USB drive containing the footage, the signed copies of transactions, and the notarized letter I had written months ago just in case. Elise watched it all. The footage showed Vanessa entering my apartment using the key she had begged to borrow 2 months prior. She walked straight to the hallway closet, pulled out a plastic bag from her purse, and tucked it behind the shoebox. The timestamp was 2 days before the arrest. No ambiguity, no confusion, just deliberate intent. Elise filed an emergency motion. The court scheduled a preliminary review. My parents and Vanessa were summoned. Elise arranged for a private pretrial mediation officially to discuss strategy unofficially to let them hang themselves with their own narrative. The room was bland and beige, just like the lies they like to tell. Vanessa walked in, first hoodie drawn, tight lips pressed into a straight line. My mom followed overly composed. My dad brought a leather portfolio he probably thought would make him look more legitimate. Elise didn't waste time. She played the video. Silence followed. A silence so thick it felt like the air itself had been shamed into stillness. Vanessa's face turned gray. My mom blinked rapidly, hands twitching. My dad muttered something under his breath. I watched them all, not with satisfaction, but with clarity. This was who they were when the mask dropped, when the script failed, when the story slipped out of their control. Elias said we'll be filing for full dismissal and criminal charges against the parties involved in the fabrication. My mother spoke first. We were just trying to protect the family. You don't understand. No, I said quietly. I do. That's the problem. Vanessa's voice cracked. You were always the favorite, she snapped. You had everything handed to you. I laughed, a short, stunned sound. Everything? You think a salary and silence equals privilege. I was the one who bailed you out. I was the one who funded your failures. And you think framing me would fix what your pride, Vanessa, looked down. Elise closed the folder and said, "This meeting is over." As they left, my father glanced at me. There was no apology in his eyes, just inconvenience. I realized then that they weren't sorry. They were just sorry they got caught. The preliminary hearing was held in a quiet courtroom tucked behind the main courthouse. There were no cameras, no press, just a judge, a few clerks, and the weight of everything they'd done pressing down on the air like a storm about to break. Elise stood beside me, calm, and focused her notes precise. Vanessa sat across from us at the defendant's table, flanked by her own lawyer, older, stiffer, already sweating. My parents were seated behind her, whispering furiously, pretending this was just a misunderstanding that could be polished away. But the footage spoke louder than any excuse. The judge watched it in silence. Vanessa entering my apartment with a key she had no right to use. Her placing the bag in the closet. Her walking out without hesitation. Elise supplemented the video with a timeline financial documents, showing unauthorized transfers, screenshots of texts that hinted at resentment, voice memos I had saved from previous arguments, where my mother called me selfish for refusing to fund family needs. It was all methodical, all built to look accidental until laid side by side. Then it became a blueprint, a conspiracy. The judge didn't ask many questions. He didn't need to. He looked at Vanessa with the kind of tired disappointment reserved for people who still believed they could outmaneuver truth with charm. "Miss Hensley," he said slowly, "do you have anything you wish to say regarding this footage?" Vanessa's mouth opened, then closed. Her lawyer leaned in, whispered something. She shook her head. Finally, she said, "It wasn't supposed to go this far. I didn't mean for her to be arrested." Elise turned to the judge. "Your Honor, we're filing a motion to dismiss all charges and are formally requesting criminal investigation into the false report, perjury, and conspiracy involved. We also intend to pursue civil damages." The judge nodded. "Motion granted. The charges are dismissed. This matter is now referred to the district attorney for further action." Just like that, the fog lifted, but the damage had already spread. Outside the courtroom, my father pulled me aside. "Naomi, let's not turn this into something it doesn't have to be. We can work this out privately." I stepped back. Privately. You wanted me in prison. You wanted to control my finances, my name, my life. And now that you're exposed, you want privacy. My mother joined voice low. We made mistakes, but it was all to protect the family. I stared at her. No. It was to protect the lie. Elise placed a hand on my shoulder. Let's go. I didn't look back. In the hallway, reporters had started gathering. Word had spread. Vanessa's mugshot would hit local papers within the hour. Elise handed me a printed document. The DA's office is preparing formal charges. Possession with intent to distribute, filing a false police report, and criminal conspiracy. And your parents, depending on what the investigators find, they may be facing charges for obstruction and financial fraud. I took the papers and nodded. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean, like a toxin had been drawn out slowly, painfully, and now I could breathe again. Elise glanced at me. You did good. Most people break under this. I didn't break, I said. I learned. That night I returned to my apartment for the first time in days. Jasper met me at the door, tail wagging slowly, nose pressed into my knees like he couldn't believe I was real. I sank to the floor beside him and exhaled long and deep. I was free, but I wasn't finished. The week after the charges were dropped, Elise invited me back to her office for a follow-up. She had something she wanted to show me. When I arrived, she handed me a document, an updated record of an old trust fund. It had been set up in my name 5 years ago by my late Aunt Evelyn, but until recently the details had been buried in a family-administered estate. Elise said, "We got access to the trustee communications. Take a look." The trust was intended to be mine alone, fully, irrevocably. Aunt Evelyn had left me a significant sum, more than $500,000, specifically designated to support my independence. But the original trustees, my parents, had quietly redirected portions of it into family investments, including one of Vanessa's failed businesses. I stared at the numbers: transfers, withdrawals, fabricated reimbursements. Elise continued. They've been trying to make it seem like the money was never yours to begin with, but the documentation is clear. The will was explicit. The account was yours, all of it. And when you started protecting your own finances, they panicked. They knew they couldn't touch what you'd moved, so they tried to remove you. My heart was pounding. You're saying this was all about inheritance control and money, a common combination. Elise's voice was even, but I could feel the anger under it. And it gets worse. When they filed the police report, your parents mentioned that you had a documented history of instability. It was an attempt to preempt any defense you might offer. That's why we needed everything airtight. I leaned back in the chair, suddenly exhausted. They were willing to let me lose my freedom just to protect a narrative and get access to something that wasn't even theirs. Elise nodded. You've done everything right. You created distance, you documented your boundaries, you sought legal help. You gave them every chance to walk away. But they wanted control more than they wanted peace. I thought about the conversations over the years. My mom calling me selfish for not helping Vanessa again. My dad warning me not to be so cold. Vanessa accusing me of thinking I was better than everyone. I wasn't better. I was just tired of being used. And when I stopped letting them write the rules, they tried to erase me from the game. Elise handed me another envelope. What's this, a copy of the restructured trust? It's fully in your name now. They've been removed as beneficiaries. The court upheld Evelyn's original intentions. It's yours, Naomi. No one can touch it again. I opened the folder, my name clearly printed, my signature recently notarized, a clean slate built from years of silent preparation. Elise said, "You should know your father tried to file an appeal to delay the transfer. It was denied." I nodded. Let him try. Let them all scramble. I wasn't scared anymore. I had clarity. I had control. They wanted to break me to protect what they thought they deserved. But all they did was prove why I never owed them anything in the first place. 3 months later, the sentencing was finalized. Vanessa took a plea deal, 2 years in a minimum security facility for possession conspiracy and filing a false police report. My parents weren't so lucky. The DA pushed for obstruction, financial fraud, and perjury. They were convicted. 18 months of jail time followed by 2 years of supervised release. The courtroom was quiet when the verdicts were read. No outbursts, no tears, just the soft clicking of pens and the sound of a family unraveling completely. They didn't speak to me. They didn't even look in my direction. But that silence didn't sting anymore. It felt like confirmation. like the final piece in a puzzle I never asked to build. I moved out of the city a week later. Jasper and I settled into a small coastal town where the mornings were slow and the evenings smelled like salt and pine. I found a job as a private financial consultant, working with women who had been financially manipulated by family members. I didn't talk much about my past. I didn't have to. The women who sat across from me in quiet rooms understood without explanation. They recognized the look in my eyes, the weight I carried. And slowly we built things: security, independence, peace. I still get letters from attorneys handling my parents' estate. I forward them to Elise. I don't open them. I don't respond. There's nothing left to say. One morning I found a plain envelope in my mailbox. No return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Vanessa. I didn't open it. I placed it in the drawer beside other things I no longer needed to carry. Maybe someday I'll read it. Maybe I won't. Either way, it doesn't matter. My life isn't defined by what they did. It's defined by what I built in spite of them. Jasper is older now. He moves slower, his steps more careful, but he still follows me room to room like he always has. At night, he sleeps curled against my legs, a living reminder that loyalty isn't a performance, it's a choice. Grandpa called last week. He told me he was proud, that he always knew I had something strong inside me. I told him I wasn't sure if I had forgiven them. He said, "You don't have to. Healing doesn't require permission, it requires truth. And you told yours." Sometimes when I'm walking along the shore and the wind is soft against my face, I think about who I was before all this. The girl who tried so hard to be small, to keep the peace, to stay invisible. I don't miss her, but I honor her. She kept me alive long enough to become this version of myself. The one who fights, the one who leaves, the one who wins. People ask if I'll ever see them again. The honest answer, I don't know. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not bitter. But I've learned that love without respect is just another kind of prison. I didn't escape one cage to walk into another. And if you're reading this, if your family has made you question your worth, made you feel like silence is safer than truth, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not alone. You are not invisible. And you don't owe anyone your ruin. My name is Naomi Hensley. I was framed by the people who raised me, but I saved myself. And I'm still here.